Again, it's an honor to be here and speak for the FCC and represent Safer Buildings Coalition, which is a public-private not-for-profit partnership that's dedicated to education and advocacy as it relates to in-building. I'm going to throw two numbers out, 70% and 64%. 70% are the number of 911 calls that come from a cellular mobile device. 64% of that 70% come from indoors. So having the capability to call for help when an emergency occurs is critical for in-building. It's not a nice thing to have, it's a necessity. People expect that. There's a public expectation. So it's relevant to how we do business today. A question was asked earlier in the earlier panel about what are property owners doing? If property owners aren't taking care of this situation, they're not going to have tenants because tenants are expecting coverage in buildings. And we see that in some of the work we're doing with REITs and property owners and others. One of the things I want to talk about is three things we look at is one, can you call for help when you have an emergency? Number two is, can we push information to you? Mike mentioned college campuses. One of the things I often talk about is an active shooter event at a college, a university. Part of their plan is we're going to notify the student populace that there's an incident taking place. How do they do that? Text message. What if you don't have coverage? The plan has zero value. So it's critical that we look at that. We talk about shopping centers and events that are taking place out there in our world today that we live in. This happens constantly across the U.S. and the world. So we've got to find a way to get coverage inside buildings. And the third piece is when we respond, public safety. I spent 36 years active response in public safety and now do some administrative stuff, public safety. Can we communicate when we get there? I've been on the scene where I'm trying to talk to our personnel inside a building and I can't communicate. You know, I often say we can talk to people on the moon and watch them get there, and I can't talk to firefighters inside a building. I'm standing in the street. How do we overcome that? It's by industry working together with public safety and developing solutions, and DAS happens to be one of those solutions that's available. We have to find a way to make it cost effective that building owners can put this in their building and it becomes part of the life safety ecosystem of that building. I say that because fire sprinklers are in the majority of the buildings you go in. Fire alarms are in the majority of the buildings you go in. So I want to do a quick history lesson. In 1878, fire sprinklers were invented. In 1896, the first fire sprinkler code was adopted here in the developed and adopted here in the United States in some areas. Now, I translate that to in-building requirements, which are now in the code. In 2009, in-building became a requirement for public safety systems. So you have to put those in areas that are adopted, whether it's through the International Fire Code published by the International Code Council or NFPA 1221, which is published by the National Fire Protection Association. Those things are becoming more and more uniform. In the fire sprinkler industry, in the first 4 years that the sprinkler code was there, 200,000 sprinklers were installed. In 2002, 35 to 40 million fire sprinklers were installed. This is coming. Public safety is here, whether you want to be a part of it or not. Public safety is here. Public safety is going to stay. And it's imperative that we have the public to be able to communicate and public safety communicate during those emergencies. Thank you.
Yeah. My first question is, do you see any limitations in a DAS system responding to first responders? I'm thinking about like stairwells, garages. Are there any limitations that are of particular concern?
The code is very specific on the coverage requirements. 99% in stairwells, fire
Right.
pump rooms, and areas where public safety are at. 95% coverage throughout the remainder of the building so that we have that capability. And those systems have to be tested on the initial installation and then annually thereafter and monitored through the fire alarm system to ensure capacity.
I would just add that's a key differentiator. Typically in a commercial cellular DAS or in-building solution, you're not going to deploy in the stairwells,
Right.
and those, but those are essentially really important areas where the fire service does their work.
Okay, we have a question from the audience. Question is from Ken, and this is for Chief Perdue. The NFPA requirements for coverage extensions are very voice-centric. What efforts are underway to extend NFPA code to include FirstNet's LTE data network? It is a future public safety mission critical voice platform.
Excellent question. One of the things, I just attended code hearings in Kentucky week before last, and we've submitted a proposal that includes data, voice and data as part of that component. We have some education to do amongst ourselves, our peers that serve on the fire code hearing committees, both in the ICC and the NFPA process. But there's work to do, and we have to include that because it is part of the critical communication systems public safety utilizes.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.